So I have the privilege of introducing to you our very first speaker this morning, and that is Tim Robinson. He is somebody who has lived here. He's lived here, he's left here, he's come back here. And I think that is the story that you are going to hear from him. Just a little bit of background about him. He has an extensive experience in various merchandising and operational roles at Walmart. He currently serves as the VP, which makes him an officer at Walmart. That's just a little inside. Once you get to be a VP, you become an officer. There are only about 250 of them. So it is a big deal when you get to that level. He's a VP for the consumables division. He's also held leadership positions in pricing strategy and new business development. He is also the co-owner of Fat Tire Bike Shop and a business owner of CBTR Outdoors. He's a former member of the Bentonville City Council, and he holds an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis and a BA in economics and music from Rhodes College. Please give a warm welcome to Tim Robinson.
So, about 20 years ago, I was starting my senior year of undergrad and staring down the barrel of graduation, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. Does that feeling resonate with anybody here? Trying to figure out what am I going to do next? And it's not just graduations. It may be you find yourself in a new town. Unexpectedly, you have to find a new job. Maybe there's some sort of family or health dynamic that's changed for you or a loved one. I think the older that we get, the bigger collection of those feelings and inflection points you might have. And so that fall semester, I was thinking about what was next for me. And when I thought about Bentonville, I grew up in Bentonville, and Bentonville was scratching about 25,000 people at the time, surrounded by chicken farms and timberland. We didn't have a movie theater yet. We had a bowling alley. There was a couple local businesses strewn about throughout downtown, but a lot of the storefronts were up for lease. And, when my friends or family or I thought about going to do something fun, we'd head down to Fayetteville. That's where you'd go to the mall to do your shopping. You go out to good restaurants. You'd go watch the Arkansas Razorbacks to get some sporting events, or maybe you'd go to the Walton Arts Center or check out some music on Dixon Street at George's Majestic Lounge. But Bentonville wasn't really a place that kids, I think, thought about wanting to be in and stay at. And I think like many kids across small towns in America, it was a place you hoped to escape from, not return to. And that was my plan, to not look back. And I thought I had what was the perfect academic justification for that. At that same time, my fall semester, being an economics major, you have to write a capstone or a thesis, tying together everything you've learned in your degree with some statistical analysis. And at the time, in 2005, Walmart was really just come off a couple decades of crazy growth, both in the U.S. and globally, and facing some really intense criticism. Every day you could wake up and read in the news, is Walmart putting mom and pops out of business? Is Walmart good for small communities across America? Labor unions were really pushing our starting wages and benefits and how we'd schedule our associates to work, questioning if this was a good career for the people who worked there. And so I wanted to do the research myself. And I set out to ask the question, is Walmart helping or hurting America? And that was going to help me get my thesis and capstone degree done, but also kind of serve as answering a deeper question for myself, having been from here. And instead of a straightforward story, it turned out to be a much more complicated, nuanced, but ultimately a hopeful project. And ultimately, that's what kind of changed everything for me. So, good morning, welcome. My name's Tim Robinson. As Blake kindly introduced me, I serve leading the merchandising execution function for Walmart. Been there for 20 years. Merchandising execution means I kind of make sure that we have all the right assortment, the right prices, the right experience for our customers when they're shopping the things in our departments. Consumables is really all the departments you'd find in a grocery store other than food. So you think about pets, baby, over-the-counter medicine, the beauty department, personal care, all the household cleaning essentials, all those kinds of things fall into our portfolio. And so ultimately, if we do our job right, we end up gaining trust with the customer and we become their retailer of choice. So they just keep repeating, and they can shop how they want to shop, whether they come to our stores, buy things online, deliver it to their house or in their refrigerator. The retail industry is really interesting right now, and it's super fun to be there. I'm here today wearing two hats. I'm going to wear the Walmart hat a little bit, but more importantly, I'm going to wear the Bentonville hat. I'm someone who grew up here and bet big on this place and its potential. And along the way, I've kind of found out that while you're making improvements and driving business or driving a community, they have a lot in common. And that's the story I want to tell you this morning. So here's a preview of what we're going to look at. I'm going to take you back a little bit deeper into the archives of Bentonville and what it was really like growing up here as a teenager. How that ended up sending me away, because I thought that that's what I wanted to do. And when I was away over in Memphis, some reflections on what I then kind of compared and contrasted, and ultimately what drove a big change of heart for me to come home and make a big impact and build community. My hope is that I can leave you with some takeaways so that you can learn from my experience. And at the end, we should have plenty of time to open it up, have a dialogue, not just with me, but with each other. I think that's the whole point of this summit and this purpose, is to bring like-minded individuals together. So let's jump back into Bentonville. I moved to Northwest Arkansas in the early 90s, and my parents moved me to Bentonville when I was in the middle of 8th grade. And let me paint a picture for you of what it was like as a teenager here in the late 90s. Our downtown square had a courthouse. Half the buildings were empty. We had the Arvest Bank. Of course, the Walton Five and Dime was there. We had one restaurant called the Station Cafe. And, you know, at the time, these kinds of buildings weren't there. We actually, where the Onyx Coffee was, that was a parking lot, and offset to the back of that was a Harp's grocery store. There was a little bookshop next to it, but a lot of the downtown businesses were half open. A lot for lease, like I mentioned earlier. Fred's Hickory Inn was our one nice restaurant we have, and that's actually the place that I started my first job when I turned 14, as the prestigious title of water boy. I ended up working my way up. They let me wait some tables by the end of it, and my most fun job there after the end of my 2 years was wearing chef pants, being in the back, making steaks and ribs and salads with some of the guys, listening to rock and roll music. Certainly grew up pretty fast when you get into jobs like that. I jokingly show the Taco Bell. That's still here on kind of Walton and Central. Obviously, it's been renovated multiple times, but that was the place that on Friday, after the Friday night lights went out, a lot of us would go park our cars, listen to music. You could pop inside and get a tasty treat if you needed to, but that was kind of what there was to do. You'd go show up at the Taco Bell parking lot because there wasn't much else going on in Bentonville at the time. We had a sushi restaurant that was in a gas station. That made us famous at one point in time. If anybody remembers that article, I couldn't find that picture or the article, but I think it was Forbes or somebody, and they joked about us having sushi here, and it was adjacent to a gas station. And that sushi restaurant's still open today. It's just not in the gas station anymore. And then there's Walmart, and this is kind of what Walmart looked like. So, did anybody call on Walmart back in the late 90s or live here in the late 90s, early 2000s? And can you relate to some of these impressions? You know, I lived in the backyard of the world's largest retailer. I had no idea what that meant. You know, I knew it was a place where people would shop. A lot of my friends' parents worked there, but my parents worked in real estate. They had no connection to Walmart or the retail industry. And so, you know, we were all just focused on the football games and running around town and volunteering and doing stuff in our church groups or whatever it may be. And really, it was a good childhood, for sure. But at the time, you also seemed like it was really boring. And I had no appreciation for the scale and the global impact and the innovation that was happening here. So, like many of my friends, I wanted to leave Northwest Arkansas. When it was time for college, I did leave. I went to Rhodes College in Memphis, as they mentioned, and studied economics. I thought I'd found everything I wanted. Big city culture, music. There's the Sun Studio where Elvis Presley recorded back in the day. Beale Street, nightlife. B.B. King had an awesome restaurant there, and sometimes he'd even play there if you're lucky. Sporting events, you know, the Memphis Pyramid had the Grizzlies that would be playing there. Mike Tyson fought in some boxing matches there. The Memphis Redbirds were a feeder program to the St. Louis Cardinals. Meeting new people at the college, you know, from all over the country. Learned how to do a proper crawfish boil from my friends in Louisiana and Texas. And one of the best things was really just the anonymity that comes with not being known in a small town. You can kind of just blend in, and you weren't always being watched. But over the years, there were some things that I also noticed that I didn't like after some of the shine wore off. Poor infrastructure. My friends and I would always joke around like, man, as you're driving around Memphis, there's sure a lot of potholes. You're getting flat tires left and right. Pollution. There's definitely some torn up places, lots of trash, not as well kept as what you see in this town like Bentonville. Crime, for sure. You always had to be careful of when you were going into a gas station or a grocery store. I definitely lost many books of CDs of people breaking into my cars back in the day. Had some friends whose cars were stolen. Challenging schools. Some of my friends who went to Rhodes were from Memphis and kind of talked and reflected on, man, the school systems here were rough, and kids had to go to private school. They couldn't go to the public schools like I grew up in. And really one of the things I didn't realize is I missed the lack of green space. We had to drive all the way out to this place called Shelby Farms, east of town, if we wanted to go get into any green space or biking or running trails. There was a couple parks that we could find, but they were pretty small. And then I did miss my family and friends more than I thought after I'd had the reflection of being away. And so that's when I made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. I accepted an internship at Walmart back home for the summer of '05. And I thought it'd just be something temporary. I thought it'd just be look good on the resume. I'd get back and hang out with some friends, save some money. But it actually ended up being a turning point that changed everything for me. And so to understand what happened next, let me give you some context. Remember, summer 2005, in August, a couple months into my internship, that's when Hurricane Katrina hit the city of New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. The devastation was clear to everybody. And at Walmart, I witnessed something a little different because I was there a couple months before this happened, focused on the business, focused on driving and optimizing our P&Ls. And, they ended up placing me in a finance internship in the domestic income tax department. So it wasn't, there's work to do, but it wasn't necessarily the most intriguing. But when this came, I witnessed something really different. And the focus of the company shifted. Our emergency operations center were staging things days in advance. The supply chain and logistics team staging supplies outside of areas before the storm hit, and it was really interesting. Then the storm hit, and it was really bad. And I personally watched Walmart move faster than the government to bring medical supplies, water, food, and other things there, ice. I saw humanity in action, and I realized that actually Walmart was a force for good with a huge heart for the associates and the communities in which we served. We sent trucks of supplies, mobile pharmacies, showers. There's even a story about one of our store managers who couldn't get into her store, and she got a bulldozer and ran through the front door and opened it up and just started passing things out to people who were in really big need. No one was asking the company for permission. We all knew what our culture and our values were, and we were just doing what was right at the time. And suddenly, being in Bentonville, being at Walmart, felt like something being bigger and global. And it pulled me in to want to be a part of it. Do any of y'all remember this picture? It was pretty big at the time. This was all of our Walmart trucks that were lined up outside of the city of New Orleans. The FEMA and everybody else was getting everybody out. Our trucks were staged and ready to come in. And we were the only ones driving the opposite direction, working with law enforcement, because all those trucks were filled with ice, water, gasoline, medical supplies, diapers, all the stuff that people needed who were completely displaced. And at that point in time, I think that Walmart realized, we gotta step it up and do more often. Because remember, the context was media was beating us up every day. And we just never told our story. And this was like the first breaking point that I think that we kind of could to say, no, we're bigger and we do help communities. Since then, in other disasters, I think the most recent one that was notable and had a similar image to this was when Hurricane Helene hit North Carolina and Asheville. Same thing happened. All the roads were shut down, nobody could get in. As soon as it opened up, a fleet of Walmart trucks were coming in. People were moving off the side of the roads, letting the trucks clear through to come in and help serve those communities, honking and cheering. It's a pretty cool thing. So I quickly noticed that I wanted to move home. That was the pull for me. Let me go forward. Trying to advance a slide here. It looks like it's not working. But after all this, I just went back to Memphis, I'll say. And it was my last year of my undergrad, and let me get back into that capstone paper because that's kind of where I tied this internship experience, and I'll go a little bit deeper. But specifically, I was trying to answer, is Walmart good for America or not? And what I did from an economics standpoint on that capstone paper was to look at a couple different statistics. So I looked at unemployment rates, I looked at inflation, I looked at sales tax collection, I looked at average income. And what I tried to do is, as Walmart expanded in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s across America, I look at the pre-period and then the post-period after the Walmart's open and try to tie a correlation to see if it was good. And the outcomes showed a strong positive correlation. Here we go, we're back live. And it was a positive impact, kind of proving against what the headlines were suggesting. And that was from my own work that I had done to help give me some buy-in. And so that analytical review, my experience at the home office, watching what happened that summer with Katrina, gave me more confidence in my hometown and that it was a force for good. And that's what ended up pulling me back home. So when I got back here and started, after the first couple months of getting into the company, as I was meeting new people, I quickly noticed that there was many other young professionals who actually felt a lot like I did when I was in high school. They came to Bentonville, wanted to get a good job at Walmart, and they did. But then the life outside of work was pretty tough. And they started questioning a lot, like, how am I going to meet a spouse? This is a pretty small town with not a lot to do here. And I'd quickly see a couple people, just after a year or two, want to leave. And that it burned me because I had been there before, and I kind of came back and wanted to be here, and I saw the good and the comparisons to other places. And so I started to think, what if I could be part of changing the story, not just at Walmart, but really of Bentonville? Because if I could help transform it to the kind of place people wanted to work, play, and live, then we'd keep this good talent to help the company. I'd keep some friends that I made along the way, and more people could be bought in like I had been. At the same time, Crystal Bridges had been announced. This is about 2007 now. And I think a lot of people knew it was going to draw a lot of visitors, but also were at the same time super scared about, like, what was their impression going to be of Bentonville when they got here outside of this amazing museum. What were they going to do? Go to the Walton Five and Dime and then see, like, the signs on the square of everything closed. And so we quickly realized that we needed culture, gathering places, energy. So a group of us started working on something a lot of people didn't think would work. We were big in the outdoors, like I mentioned, appreciated green space, and had kind of started dabbling in mountain biking in college. And so we started figuring out, let's build some mountain bike trails. We wanted to create a recreational activity that kind of drew on some of the natural beauty and geography that we had here in Arkansas that was of Bentonville. And at the time, I think if you told people that we were going to build some of the world-class trails and be the mountain bike capital of the world, they definitely would have laughed. Here's what we were up against. Not many people in Northwest Arkansas were professional mountain bike trail builders. We knew of one guy named Don West who had made a trail map book that he had sold in some bike shops back in the day that were of trails across Arkansas, but nothing really here in Bentonville. No funding from the city. Luckily, it started with some individual donations and one passionate family who was behind it. The land was pretty rough timber, with steep terrain, underbrush, no real infrastructure or supplies to help us. And a lot of people thought mountain biking was going to be a pretty niche sport and not probably draw a lot of tourism, just something that a couple people like to do. But my friends and I spent the weekends outside of the jobs that we had started, kind of flagging trees, trying to visualize, like, where could you maybe ride a bike? Where are some of these deer trails that we could kind of widen and maybe cut into? We'd certainly go to Lowe's and buy a bunch of supplies and, like, little wood log rides and jumps and stuff, and we'd be pulling up our cars down there into Slaughter Pen, getting stuff out of the back of our car, hammering stuff into the ground, making these little log skinnies, opening our car doors, blasting music so we can be, like, enjoying some music as we were building some of this with our hands. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just trying to have fun and think that it was kind of cool. And then eventually we recruited some other cyclists. We met some people out there who'd kind of heard maybe there's some trails coming. And as the word kind of spread just naturally through the community, leveraged those relationships and those friends, because soon the trails did open, and there was 5 miles and that we kind of started in 2006, opened in April of 2007. And we realized really quickly that weeds were growing up, fall leaves would fall, and the trail would get into disarray really fast. And if we wanted people, we needed people to help maintain it because nobody else was going to do it. And so we started this organization called FAST. me and a guy named Dale Bailey, and it stood initially for Friends at Slaughterpen Trail. Since then, it's been reverted to Friends of Arkansas Single Track, so they can work on other trails other than just Slaughterpen. So eventually we connected with what were some somewhat professional trail builders, some guys who were graduating at the University of Arkansas with landscaping engineering degrees, and they're going to go into landscaping, but they also really like to mountain bike. And we were like, hey, can you guys help us build this trail? And they said yes. That was the start of progressive trail design and some good friends we made back then. And so finally, April 2007, the trails opened publicly to the city. That passion then led me to opening Fat Tire Bike Shop, because so many of us were having this experience of getting out there trying to pre-ride the trails, get them ready, and then when our bikes inevitably broke, we were having to go down to Fayetteville. We'd go to a little bike shop called High Roller, which is still there, and they're a great business, but it'd take like 3 or 4 weeks to get your bike back, and we're like, man, what an inconvenient experience. If we want people in Bentonville to ride this trail, this town needs a bike shop, and we need to have really fast turnaround. So if somebody breaks their bike, you get it in and out, and hopefully in 24, 48 hours, unless you have to special order a part, we'd get them back out there and they'd be riding those trails again. We had no idea what we were doing. We were 22 years old. I was not going to leave my job at Walmart because that was my safety net as I started. And my buddy who decided to open with me was like, I want to work for myself, but he still had a semester of college left. So we were kind of cobbling together a business plan, which we had never written before, trying to cobble together a pro forma, which we had never done before. And, you know, we just really had this passion and this energy and naivety that kept us going. And it wasn't easy. I certainly remember, you know, as we put all that together, we'd go float this business plan asking for money because we had no money to start it, to family friends whose parents maybe were executives at Walmart or something, showing them our business plan or pro forma, saying, you want to invest, get behind us. Everybody said no. Luckily, the banks who knew us and our families, they were like, okay, guys, like it is a good business plan and we want to support you, but you know, we can't give you what you're asking for, and so we'll give you half. And half will be an SBA loan. The other half, will your parents co-sign that for you? And that's how we got up and going. And, you know, our vision of getting this first bike shop open on the square, which is now where the Table Mesa bar is, started with about 30 bikes. It was pretty gimpy. And getting through that first winter was definitely tough. But, you know, it helped build a bike culture. And, you know, enough people believed in us and kind of bought into it to keep it going. Thank goodness Walmart has like a spring bonus program, because then that kind of flooded the market with some money, and the weather got nicer and people were getting out there wanting to try these trails they had heard about that previous winter. You know, and after a few years, other cities came calling and they're saying, hey, will you open a Fat Tire in our town? And it's crazy to think that we now have 14 stores across Arkansas and Oklahoma, one of the largest Trek dealers in North America. But it all started kind of just with a passion. And, you know, things I learned while I was working at Walmart really helped me at Fat Tire and put some process and structure and incentives in order for the team that worked there. Also, things that worked while I was being a maverick, starting my own company at 22, helped me at Walmart and think about how do I break down these silos and these processes and just run fast and innovate. I think when you start with your passion, like bikes or business outdoors, for me, you never really know where it's going to take you. And for me, what started as friends building bike trails and opening up shop turned into something bigger. And after a few years, we quickly had the realization that we thought we were just building trails and activities, but actually we were building momentum to shape the entire culture and community and ultimately maybe the region. So one of the first big coalitions I got into, because I think this is one of the big things you got to do, is bring people along with you and who kind of share a common vision, is this nonprofit called Downtown Bentonville Inc. Has anybody heard of it? Yeah. It had just started a couple years before. It was made up of some small business owners, some people who are involved in businesses or own buildings or land downtown. And the whole goal of this organization was to create a sense of place, specifically at first on the square, and to define a downtown master plan and what were we going to do to revitalize downtown. Because again, remember, Crystal Bridges was coming, and thankfully in 2007 when they announced it, they said it was going to be open in 2009. Construction always takes longer than you think, especially on something like that scale and size, and it opened in 2011, so it bought us time for downtown Bentonville to try to create this sense of place. And because organic traffic wasn't coming to downtown, and because you couldn't incentivize any businesses to come there because it's hard because there's no traffic, we propped up this fake traffic. And we started things like First Fridays, which was just kind of this downtown block party, themed differently, March all the way through October. So the first Friday of the month, you started around 3 o'clock when kids were getting out of school or folks were getting off work, and go into the evening, and there'd be groups down there from all sorts of things that kind of tied into that theme of booths, of food. And when you created that traffic of people coming to these block parties, it started creating memories for people and their families. And like, okay, the downtown, that was fun that night. Let's go again next month, right? Similarly, we created the farmers market. Most towns have farmers markets. We didn't have one back then, but since we had Fridays once a month happening, how can we create something every Saturday? And eventually hopefully 2 days a week. And so other booths, this fake traffic coming downtown, creating memories, creating a sense of place. And once you started doing that long enough, you could then convince people like Table Mesa, hey, well, you guys have a restaurant up in Seattle. You guys want to move to Bentonville and open a restaurant on our square? And when they come to enough of those events, they'd be like, okay, there's some traffic coming here. We can kind of see what's coming. We hear about this museum. And once Table Mesa comes, some other people come, and the dominoes start falling. And that fake traffic becomes organic traffic. And then it goes from there because other people want to get in on it. And soon, downtown Bentonville had kind of achieved some of our vision and mission of creating this sense of culture and place. We no longer had to go try to drive economic impact because it was coming, and we were having to be the gatekeeper of everybody and their mom wanted their event to be in downtown Bentonville on the square. And us in the city were having to say no more often than not because we just couldn't have that many events on the square. And so, after 2007 to about 2014, success. I think that downtown had some energy. I had to roll off the board at that time because I'd kind of hit my max tenure and served as president and wanted to pass the baton to give it some new energy. And so I was really sad, though, because I was thinking, wow, man, I love that experience. What else can I do? And someone's like, you should run for city council. I was like, city council? I'm like 30. Don't like old people do that. But, okay, let's do it. And actually a group of us all ran for city council who were pretty young, passionate about what was going on in Bentonville. And that was the second coalition that I was. It was different because this wasn't just rallying friends and nonprofits. This was rallying like citizens, city staff, neighborhoods, businesses. And I remember one of the most contentious projects that happened probably during my 8-year tenure on city council was the development of housing because, we had really a kind of a housing issue. We were starting to sprawl way far out. The more you sprawl, the more traffic that creates, and then your roads have these issues from an infrastructure standpoint. So we're thinking about how do you densify housing, lower housing prices, because a lot of these people that you want to work in your bike shops or restaurants or bars or whatever, like they need to be able to afford to live here too. These are not all just Walmart executives living in Bentonville. And so Crystal Flats was this kind of bigger development that we wanted to create that was on J Street and right across from Orchard Park, if you know where that is, across from where Crystal Bridges is. And man, it was this big idea, and it was going to be pretty adjacent to downtown, to parks, to green space, to the museum, getting all these people who could live there. Some of it was going to be subsidized to help lower the cost for people that we wanted to live in Bentonville. And man, the neighborhoods just freaked out. And we're worried about traffic, worried about density. Not in my backyard. We like the idea of it, but put it over there, not here. And it was intense. And after months of iteration and hours of listening to the community, finding common ground, we finally built plans to kind of put that in. And later we were able to successfully get more bond money and help accommodate things along infrastructure, parks, and to help fuel the growth that we knew was coming. A takeaway, I think, is once you prove momentum is in one part of the community, like in bikes or recreation, people start to believe momentum is possible everywhere. And that's really, really important. And so the result is now, I think downtown Bentonville is kind of like a Norman Rockwell-esque scene. We've kind of heard that analogy before. The place is idyllic, that cities are coming here to look and see what we've done with our downtown, to see how they can copy that in other downtowns, not only in the region, but across the country or maybe even the world. Our mountain bike trail, which people did laugh at first, has been called the mountain bike capital of the world. We are one of the places where people come to, where events are. We have the Olympic team that trains here. And some of the outcomes that we hoped would achieve did happen. Like Walmart's retention and our recruiting is so much easier that we can, go anywhere and recruit. People want to live here. They not only see a great job, but they see a really fun life outside of work. And so I think tourism, job opportunities grew, and really the economy became stronger and more resilient. So Bentonville today isn't the same sleepy town it used to be, is it? There's some things that I miss for sure. One of them being traffic. I remember being able to drive from the north side of Walton all the way down around Rainbow Curve in about 5 or 7 minutes, most times a day. That's a dream now, unless you're before 6:30 a.m. or after 9:30 p.m. Cost of living is not quite the same benefit it used to be. That used to be a selling point, we could say, and then that's become more complicated. And there's some old businesses that are gone that I miss. The Station Cafe I mentioned earlier on the square was a great little greasy spoon spot. Fred's Hickory Inn, the first restaurant I worked at, I love that place and I miss it. But there's so many other nice restaurants now. I think the pros outweigh the cons, and this is now a town I'm proud of to call home. A couple pictures here. That top left one is the Thaden School. I failed to mention earlier, here's my family. My wife, Ashley, we just got married, and we've been married for 16 years now, and those are our two kids. Boyce, my first grade son, goes to the Thaden School, and our daughter, Iris, has just started Montessori school, and so it's a place I definitely want to raise my family. You can see some of the mountain bike trails, the images of crystal bridges, really cool businesses that have started up like Onyx that are pretty famous not only here, but even further, and they're winning competitions internationally. And then, of course, some of the places like we're in today in the Ledger popping up. So I've shared a lot of experiences and several things I've learned along the way. And if I had to boil it down, here are the takeaways that I think matter most that might be able to be helpful for you. Early on, I used to think that somebody else would fix these things. And once maybe they'd make Bentonville better, and then I'd move back. The city government would do some stuff to make things better. Someone would build new restaurants or parks, and then I'd think about being part of it. One thing we often say at Walmart is they aren't coming to do it. If you want change to happen, you need to do it. And so no one's coming to save your community. No one's coming more to save your business than you are. And if you want to change it, you have to be the one to start it. And if you don't have all the right answers, you just have to be willing to raise your hand and rally people to help you. I'm surprised how quickly things seemed impossible became possible, but you have to be the one to believe first. The second thing is start with your passion. And for me, it was the outdoors that turned, trail building into opening a bike shop. But I think if you start where your passions lie, your passions sustain you when the work gets really hard or when you don't know if you're going to succeed. You can channel that passion in all sorts of ways. It doesn't have to be opening a business, although that's fun. And you can certainly find niches where a for-profit is the right thing that you can do to help build a community. But there's also nonprofits, like I mentioned, some that maybe already recently have existed for a while or are recently starting up, like the DBI for me, or some that don't exist and you need to start them up, like FAST. There's several nonprofits that also make sense. You can't really quite make a business and make profit, but from a nonprofit standpoint, maybe that makes sense for your passion. Or maybe it's neither of those and it's public service, and it doesn't have to be a city council where you have to go drive some big election to be the mayor or a county judge or anything. There's also appointed positions that are help support structures to city governments that help with public service, but start with your passion. And then the third thing is, find best practices and partner and borrow what works, because, you don't have to invent everything from scratch. And I think being in Bentonville and someone who's grown up in Walmart, looking to Mr. Sam, he was the epitome of that, right? I mean, he'd bring that yellow notepad around into Targets, into Kmart's, ask people what they did, what worked, what didn't. I did the same thing. As I was traveling around for Walmart, as I was thinking about opening Fat Tire and writing the business plan, I'd go into bike shops in LA, in Atlanta, in Ohio, wherever I was working on Walmart. In the evening after dinner, I'd try to drive and go catch them before they closed down, and I'd be asking them, who are your suppliers? What point of sale system are you using? If I were to show you like a pro forma and a P&L, am I missing anything that's like a cost I haven't thought about? I'm not going to be competing with you guys. I'm from Arkansas. Open the books, right? Bentonville did it too. When I was on city council, as we were trying to figure out our growth plan and, if we could go get bond money, what was the most efficient way to use it based on the problems that we thought we had. Let's go look at communities that were 10, 15, 20 years ahead of us. We'd go to Austin, Texas, ask them what was happening, Boulder, Colorado, Louisville, Kentucky. As we were thinking about how to make Bentonville a more bike-friendly community from a city government standpoint, once they decided to lean in and start joining the forces, we'd send some of our council members and city staff over to Amsterdam, to Denmark, places that have really got it figured out, and you can steal best practices. Great leaders aren't afraid to borrow, partner, and steal the best ideas. So, if you remember anything from today, I hope it's this. Don't wait for them. Start with your passion and don't reinvent the wheel. That's how you build something you can be proud of and have fun along the way. So let me take you back to where we started. 20 years ago, I was a college senior living 350 miles away from here, convinced I'd escape my hometown for good. And My capstone paper on Walmart's economic impact helped prove that Bentonville wasn't a place to leave behind. Instead, it taught me to stay curious and let the evidence guide me. The lessons have carried through everything since, from building trails to opening my own business, to serving on city council, leading teams at Walmart. And I think real change happens when you believe before others do and rally people to help support that belief. Today's Bentonville looks nothing like it does. I love this picture. I don't know who took it or where, but I think it's vibrant. It kind of captures the vibrant, creative spirit. And we're actually known around the world now, kind of like Walmart. And the most important thing is that transformation didn't happen because someone else showed up. It happened because ordinary people decided to lean in. What I hope you take away and to think about is, what's your Bentonville? Is there a place, a system, a business, an organization that you feel conflicted about? How are you going to lean in and make it better? What I've learned is if you start with your passion, find others to join you, and believe before it's obvious, you can change the story. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. Alicia and I are the founders of Nargo,
Awesome.
and
what
being
you
the
guys are
biggest Trek dealer in North America, we appreciate you bringing a small business like us. I'm also an ex-Walmart
Okay.
person,
Yep.
and started this whole thing in our garage. And a lot of what you're saying resonates really deeply with us. I think a lot of mirroring, and honestly, a lot of me being very inspired by you. Just your story, and having known it before I heard it today. So I just wonder, I think a lot of people in this room work for big companies.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of people that work for big companies that do want to do the things we're talking about. But there's like a little bit of a stigma, and maybe it's unsaid, but there is a bit of a stigma for doing the kind of work that you're doing outside of Walmart while being such a high-level leader. And at the time, I understand your position was not.
Yeah.
But, still, people at that level still want to be entrepreneurs in their communities or run on city council. And I want to praise you one more time. We just started Bike Polo in a park down the street, and who's there? Half Fat Tire employees.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I didn't even know.
and that, so obviously no stigma in Fat Tire.
Yeah.
You're leading a culture of that there on a really great, like, iconic thing in the backyard of this global company. And I just wonder if you can speak to that at all, if there's any, because I think breaking that stigma within the big corporate and creating a culture more like we're talking about at Fat Tire, it would really create scalable change within all these communities to empower individuals in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I think is awesome about Walmart, even though Fortune 1, right, huge, people could say it's bureaucratic, and maybe in some instances, depending on who you work for, that's how they run that team there. But I think that, in reading Sam Walton's book, Made in America, he was an entrepreneur. And he wanted to not be held or shackled back by anything, and he wanted to go do what was right. And he talked a lot about, hey, we're here to make communities better. We're here to lower the cost of living so everybody can save money and live better. And he wanted store managers in their communities to be on city council. He wanted people to start up volunteer organizations and give back. And he actually empowered and gave budget to stores to do that from Walmart to the communities, in addition to them doing it outside, above and beyond, whether it be through their church groups or other civic organizations. And so as I kind of had that in the back of my mind and had some of these passions, like luckily, for the first several years and first part of that story, I didn't have kids. My wife was super supportive, and she for sure helped enable me to make some of those things happen. I never could have done it had I had two little ones who were wanting my time and be home at dinner every night, because the Fat Tire and those trails kind of were my kids, at first. And when I told Walmart about it, it's like, I'm still here. I'm going to do a great job, and all this stuff's on my own free time. And if I ever have to take PTO, I will. But I'm thinking about running for city council. What do you guys think about that? I'm going to be opening this bike shop. I've got to send it to the ethics committee. There's fine, don't let me ever be over the bike department. That's fine. I'll totally conflict of interest. I get it. I'll go work in other areas. There's enough other jobs at Walmart. And so I think just being transparent and honest with the employer, but also making sure that you seed some of those passions that you have with what are the cultural organizational values, and find those right leaders in the company to help support it. But yeah, I mean, I think Walmart's always been a big proponent of it. I'm certainly not the only one. I know other leaders in our company who are on city councils in Rogers and other places. And so it's nice to have that support. But thank you for your comments, and congrats on awesome company. I love Nargo.
Thank you. Do you want the mic?
Yeah. Ron.
Good morning. Thank you for your comments. I grew up in a small town in Central Florida and tried to leave, and I'm still there.
Hey.
So I understand.
Yep.
There's a wonderful thing about being on the 6th floor out on the balcony, because you can look out over the city and see not one solar panel. So you are a very influential guy. It baffles me that in such a nice climate with a lot of sun, there's no solar here.
Yeah.
So anything that can be done there,
Yeah.
I'm glad to help. So
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that was actually a big topic of debate when I was on council. And there are some. You may not see it from here, but my neighbor has a whole bunch of solar panels staring at me from his rooftop. And when I was on council, I would hear from a lot of people who wanted to get behind it. And for whatever reason, so Bentonville owns its own utilities company, their own power company, and the economics and the way that our city power company transfers energy back and forth doesn't fully help scale the benefit that other communities incentivize with. And so we have to crack that on the city level with the utilities and how you transfer that power when you overproduce and then sell that energy essentially back to the city for others to use when you can't use it all. Right now, there's just not that full benefit, so I don't think the incentive's there for individuals or companies to want to do it as much. But that's definitely a conversation that's been ongoing and maybe a nut that needs to be cracked.
yeah, I figured that was the case.
Yeah.
They haven't factored in externalities into the
Yep.
cost, and they're selling it way too cheap.
Yep,
So.
exactly.
Hey, I'm Garrett Girdley. I attend BHS, and I was just curious. I understand that there have been giants who paved the way for us, like Sam Walton, who have made it easier for us to start businesses. But I was curious, what are some of the inherent challenges that come with starting a business, and what challenges did you have to overcome when you started Fat Tire?
Yeah, good question. Thanks for coming. So yeah, I think that the biggest challenge is finding where can you combine passion with a good business concept, with something that you can get the right level of resources and support to sustain. I think one of the biggest things for me was, we certainly had the passion. We didn't have the resources, and so, but I felt like the business model and what was coming with the trails, and the growth that I felt like could come from a tourism standpoint with Crystal Bridges and the trails kind of combined. If I could just sustain long enough to get there, then maybe it would work out. But it was certainly the resources and the business acumen and knowledge to help us bridge that gap. Because like I mentioned, the bank gave us half of what we asked. So our 6-month rainy day fund was non-existent, and we were living hand to mouth for the most part for that first year. And then after the first year, we started seeing some growth, and Trek came knocking at our door like, hey, we love what you guys are doing. Will you guys open a store in Fayetteville? And I'm like, dude, that was like the most stressful year I've just had. You want me to do it again? And so, I was like, we're interested, but like, you got to help us. And so it's finding out like, what are those asks? How do you bridge the gap? How do you have the business acumen? And if you don't have it, how can you do the research to educate yourself? How can you go find mentors or like a board that you kind of consult with to help you to bridge that gap? And so I think, one of the things you'll hear about in the business world is cash flow is king. And you really quickly learn, whose bills do you need to pay first? And honestly, obviously it's like taxes, utilities, because you need to keep the lights on, your staff on payroll. And then there's some more squishy things down the line that's like, okay, this says it's due then, but like if I don't pay them till the next week or next month, they're probably not going to kill me. And so you have to figure out like, how does all that work without getting yourself into hot water too? And so it's cash flow is king, and finding the right amount of resources to support you there is important. But through that, writing the business plan was the most important thing for us. And luckily I had found some really good template online that was like 40 pages long. It was like, here's all the research you need to do. Here's how you should structure your business plan. Here's the things you need to think about. Had we not done that due diligence going into it, we definitely wouldn't have made it through that first winter.
Thank you.
Yep.
second. What's going on? I'm Joey Spangers. I'm here from Austin, Texas.
Awesome.
I'm known also from Central Florida. Grew up in a small town, but I'm known as the best bookkeeper ever, and I support a lot of CPG founders across the country, around the world. And one of the things I do is I bring a lot of founders together, and we talk about things beyond business. So I guess my question is someone that first time in Bentonville,
Yes, welcome.
just visiting for 3 days. How does someone that lives in Austin help support what's happening here in Bentonville? I think there's something interesting. Obviously, a lot more for me to uncover, but so far the people I've met in the ecosystem are pretty interesting, and I think there's a lot of opportunity that I can maybe help with.
Yeah, cool. And I don't want to be the only one to answer this because I think there's other people in Bentonville too, whether it be Jeff or others who, probably have good ways to connect you with other entrepreneurs. But there's definitely platforms and not only in a summit like this, but there's kind of incubators that we kind of get and bring together small business owners. I forgot what some of the names of them are now, but I know that bring Jeff a microphone. He might remember some of them. But there's ways that we're trying to bring small businesses together, entrepreneurial ideas. Certainly, there's an innovation center down at the University of Arkansas that Doug McMillan funds, who's the CEO of Walmart, and so there's this incubator down there. But there's a lot of people who are plugged into a lot of things, and whether it be civic organizations or some of these entrepreneurial kind of podcasts and groups that kind of come together, I think that could be a cool way to plug in. Anybody else have anything to add from that? I'm not the only one who knows about this.
Hello, my name is Viraj Sristi. I'm a senior at Bentonville High School.
Real quick, before you go into a completely separate question, I want to make sure, is there anybody else who knows of other ways to plug in that wants to contribute? Yeah, there's a organization called the Northwest Arkansas Regional Council, and they do some good work that brings all of the communities together above and beyond cities. And so they bring all 5 of our big cities together, thinking about long-term things. But it's more of regional economic impact stuff, probably a little bit less business focused, but they could dabble in both and could connect you for sure. Okay, all right, sorry.
Hello, so my name is Viraj Sristi, and I'm a senior at Bentonville High School. And as you've scaled your business over time with Fat Tire, what is something that you've developed and thought about that if you could go back in time and switch something, or something that you wish you knew while starting your business as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. It was interesting. I think for the first 5 years, so there's me and one of my best friends from Bentonville High School who started Fat Tire together, right? And we grew up and we had a bunch of fun since 8th grade, went off to different colleges, but remained close friends and came back and started it together. And like I mentioned, I wanted to keep my career at Walmart, but I was probably more of the business acumen, finance, legal guy that would kind of help that side of the business after hours and kind of administratively, where he started the first 5 years operator, buying all the stuff, hiring the people, running the store, being the store manager. And those first 5 years were tough because we were best friends, had a lot of good times together, but also had a little bit of different expectations on how operationally the store should run. He was trying to live his life, have fun, work-life balance, all that kind of stuff. Here I am all stressed out looking from the finance and legal lens, how are we going to make all this work? Dude, you got to be working harder. Don't be going on rides all the time or leaving to go on trips. You got to be there, man, on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm sorry. And so it created a little bit of strife as you go into business with a friend, and you got to really find that boundary. And luckily for us, I think we realized that our friendship had this conflict now that we didn't really like. And we still shared the same passion, the vision. We wanted the same outcomes, but our styles were a bit different and our expectations were a bit different. So by year 5, though, we found somebody else to run the company for us, let him then go do something else and be an equal owner like I was, who wasn't in the day-to-day. And that just made it so much easier. So we could put the pressure, align the incentives, set the expectations with somebody who worked for us instead of having somebody be an owner-operator who was also one of your best friends together. So I wish I would have figured that out a little bit sooner. But we're still best friends, and here 18, 19 years later, it's working really well.